My child, there are moments in life when everything changes in a single heartbeat. Not because the world changes, not because circumstances suddenly become different, but because a hidden truth finally comes into the light. And right now, that is exactly what has happened. Your soulmate has discovered your true feelings. Not the feelings you showed on the surface, not the feelings you tried to hide, not the feelings buried beneath silence. The real feelings, the deep feelings, the feelings that remained alive even when distance separated you, the feelings that never completely disappeared. And the moment they discovered the truth, everything changed. My child, for a long time this person believed a story that was not true. They believed you had moved on. They believed you had forgotten them. They believed your heart no longer cared. They believed the chapter had ended forever. And because they believed those things, they stayed away. They remained silent. They convinced themselves there was no reason to return, no reason to reach out, no reason to hope. But then something happened. A conversation, a message, a revelation, a moment they never expected. And suddenly, the truth became impossible to ignore. You cared. You always cared. Far more than they realized. Far more than they allowed themselves to believe. And when that realization entered their heart, it shook them completely. Because now they had to face a reality they spent years avoiding. The reality that someone truly loved them. The reality that someone genuinely cared. The reality that someone never completely closed the door. My child, the discovery hit them harder than anything else. Harder than regret. Harder than loneliness. Harder than every sleepless night. Because now they understood what they almost lost. Now they understood what they walked away from. Now they understood the value of what once stood directly in front of them. And with every passing moment, the realization grew stronger. They replayed old conversations, old memories, old moments, and suddenly everything looked different. Every smile carried new meaning. Every conversation carried new meaning. Every memory carried new meaning. Things they once overlooked now felt precious. Things they once misunderstood now made sense. Things they once ignored now felt impossible to forget. My child, for years they believed time would solve everything. They believed distance would erase feelings. They believed silence would make emotions disappear. But they were wrong. Because real feelings do not disappear simply because they are ignored. Real feelings wait. Real feelings survive. Real feelings remain alive beneath the surface. And now, they are finally realizing that. The more they think about you, the more emotional they become. The more memories return. The more questions appear. The more their heart refuses to stay quiet. Because something inside them is awakening. Something they tried to suppress. Something they tried to escape. Something they tried to deny. Love. Real love. The kind that survives distance. The kind that survives mistakes. The kind that survives years. And for the first time, they are no longer fighting it. They are no longer running from it. They are no longer pretending it doesn't exist. Because truth has finally become stronger than fear. My child, the plans they once thought were important no longer matter. The distractions no longer matter. The excuses no longer matter. Everything that once kept them busy suddenly feels insignificant. Because when the heart gains clarity, it immediately recognizes what truly matters. And right now, you matter. More than they expected. More than they admitted. More than they ever allowed themselves to realize. They tried to continue living normally. They tried to focus on other things. They tried to move through their day as if nothing had changed. But nothing worked. Because every road led back to the same thought. You. Every quiet moment led back to you. Every memory led back to you. Every dream led back to you. And with every passing day, the pull became stronger. Not weaker. Stronger. My child. One evening they sat completely alone. No distractions. No noise. No interruptions. Just themselves and their thoughts. And in that silence, the truth finally arrived. Clear. Simple. Undeniable. They never stopped caring. They never completely let go. They never truly forgot. And now, they no longer want a future filled with unanswered questions. They no longer want a future controlled by fear. They no longer want a future built on silence. Because fear has already stolen enough. Enough years. Enough opportunities. Enough memories. Enough happiness. No more. The chapter controlled by fear is ending. And the chapter guided by truth is beginning. As they looked into the darkness that night, one thought echoed louder than every other thought. One truth became impossible to ignore. One realization changed everything. And that realization was this. If their feelings are real, if their heart still cares, if there is still even the smallest chance. I have to go to them. And my child, for the first time in years, they stopped making excuses and started making their way back to you. My child, the moment that thought entered their heart, everything changed. Not gradually, not eventually, immediately, because for the first time in years, they stopped asking themselves whether they should return and started asking themselves how quickly they could get to you. The difference was enormous. For years they lived inside uncertainty. Now certainty had arrived. For years they listened to fear. Now they were listening to truth. For years they stayed frozen. Now they were moving. My child, that night they barely slept. Every time they closed their eyes, memories appeared. Your smile, your voice, your kindness, your patience, the way you believed in them, the way you understood them, the way you made them feel seen. And with every memory, their heart became more certain, more determined, more ready, because they finally understood something. People spend years searching for happiness, years searching for peace, years searching for meaning, only to discover they walked away from something precious long ago, and that realization was changing everything. My child, as morning arrived, they woke up with a feeling they hadn't experienced in years. Clarity, pure clarity, no confusion, no hesitation, no second-guessing, just certainty, the kind of certainty that only arrives when the heart finally accepts the truth. And the truth was simple. They wanted you. Not someday, not eventually. Now, the plans they once made no longer seemed important. Meetings could wait. Schedules could wait. Everything could wait. Because some opportunities are too valuable to postpone. Some conversations are too important to delay. Some people are too precious to lose again. And you were one of those people. My child, as they prepared to leave, their hands trembled slightly. Not because they were uncertain, because they cared. Because when something truly matters, the heart feels it deeply, and you mattered deeply. For years they imagined what they would say if they ever saw you again. Thousands of different conversations, thousands of different possibilities, thousands of different outcomes. But now that the moment was approaching, none of those rehearsed speeches seemed important. Because the truth was enough. Honesty was enough. Their heart was enough. And for the first time, that felt freeing. As they made their way toward you, the memories continued flooding back. Not the painful memories, the beautiful ones, the small moments, the ordinary moments, the moments that once seemed insignificant, yet somehow became unforgettable. The conversations, the laughter, the quiet understanding, the connection, the feeling of being known, the feeling of being accepted, the feeling of being home. My child, they finally understood something. Home was never a place. Home was a person. And every mile that separated them from you suddenly felt unbearable. Because now they knew exactly where their heart wanted to be. Exactly where it belonged. Exactly where it had been trying to return all along. Their pulse raced. Their thoughts raced. Their emotions raced. But underneath all of it, there was peace. A deep peace. Because even if the future remained uncertain, they were finally doing what their heart had wanted for years. They were choosing courage. They were choosing honesty. They were choosing love over fear. And that choice was changing everything. As the distance between you grew smaller, one thought repeated itself over and over inside their mind. A thought so powerful it drowned out every fear. A thought so clear it silenced every doubt. A thought that became their only focus. Please let me tell them everything. Because this time, they would not hide. This time, they would not run. This time, they would not leave words unspoken. This time, they would finally tell you the truth. And my child, they were getting closer with every passing moment. My child, every step brought them closer. Closer to the conversation they had imagined for years. Closer to the truth they should have spoken long ago. Closer to the person who never completely left their heart. As they traveled toward you, something unexpected happened. The fear that once controlled them began disappearing. Not because the situation became easier. Because their desire to see you became stronger than their fear of rejection. For years they worried about what might happen if they returned. Now they were focused on something else. What might happen if they never tried? And that thought was far more painful. My child, life has a way of revealing what truly matters. Not during easy moments. During moments of decision. During moments when the heart must choose between comfort and courage. And this person was finally choosing courage. The road ahead seemed shorter than ever. The distance seemed smaller than ever. Because when the heart is moving towards something it truly desires, every obstacle feels temporary. Every delay feels manageable. Every mile feels worth it. As they looked out the window, they began remembering details they thought they had forgotten. The sound of your laughter, the way your eyes lit up when you talked about something you loved, the kindness you showed even when nobody was watching, the way you encouraged people, the way you believed in others, the way you made ordinary moments feel meaningful. And suddenly, the realization became overwhelming. They weren't simply returning to someone they cared about. They were returning to someone who changed their life. Someone whose influence remained long after the distance began. Someone whose absence taught them the true value of presence. My child. A tear rolled down their face. Not from sadness, from gratitude. Because despite all the mistakes, despite all the years, despite all the missed opportunities, there was still a chance. A chance to speak. A chance to listen. A chance to tell the truth. A chance to stop wondering. And sometimes one chance is all a heart needs. As the sun slowly moved across the sky, they quietly whispered words they had never spoken aloud before. I still love them. The words felt real, powerful, liberating, because they were no longer hiding from the truth. They were finally embracing it. And with every passing moment, their determination grew stronger. Their heart grew steadier. Their purpose grew clearer. Because now there was only one thing left to do. Find you, look into your eyes, and finally tell you everything they should have said years ago. The story that once seemed over was moving toward a brand new chapter. And for the first time in a very long time, their heart was filled with hope. My child, the moment finally arrived. The moment they had imagined 1,000 times. The moment they had replayed in their mind during sleepless nights. The moment they had prayed for. The moment they had nearly convinced themselves would never happen. And now, it was real. They were here, standing only moments away from seeing you again. My child. Their heart was beating so hard they could hear it. Every breath felt heavier. Every second felt longer. Every step felt significant. Because after everything that happened, after all the years, after all the mistakes, after all the silence, they were finally here. Not in a dream, not in a memory, not in their imagination. Reality. And reality was far more powerful than anything they imagined. As they moved closer, 1,000 emotions rushed through them. Hope, fear, excitement, gratitude, love, regret, joy. Every emotion seemed to exist at the same time. But above all else, one feeling stood stronger than the rest. Determination. Because no matter what happened next, they would finally tell you the truth. The whole truth. Nothing hidden. Nothing left unsaid. Nothing held back. My child. Then they saw you. Across the distance. Standing there. Real. Alive. Beautiful. And for a moment, everything stopped. The noise disappeared. The world disappeared. Time itself seemed to disappear. Because the only thing they could see was you. Their eyes immediately filled with tears. Not because they were sad. Because reality was finally standing in front of them. The person they thought about for years. The person they searched for in memories. The person they compared everyone else to. The person they never truly forgot. Was standing right there. And suddenly, every mile became worth it. Every sleepless night became worth it. Every difficult lesson became worth it. Every painful year became worth it. Because it led to this moment. My child, you looked up, and your eyes met theirs. For a second, neither of you moved. Neither of you spoke. Words seemed too small. The moment felt too important. The emotions felt too large. You simply stared at each other, trying to process reality. Trying to process the fact that the distance was finally gone. Trying to process the fact that the person who once disappeared had returned. Then something happened. Something neither of you planned. You smiled. A small smile. A genuine smile. A smile that reached your eyes. And the moment they saw it, every remaining fear vanished. Because that smile carried warmth. That smile carried understanding. That smile carried hope. And hope was all they needed. My child. They slowly walked toward you. Their hands trembling. Their heart racing. Their emotions overflowing. And when they finally stood before you, only a few feet away, the words they practiced for years disappeared completely. Every speech vanished. Every plan vanished. Every prepared sentence vanished. Because the heart rarely follows scripts during moments like this. Instead, they simply looked into your eyes and whispered, I found my way back. The tears immediately fell, not only from them, from both of you. Because those 5 words carried years of meaning, years of growth, years of lessons, years of searching, years of love. My child, for a moment neither of you cared about the past. Neither of you cared about the mistakes. Neither of you cared about the lost years. Because the present moment was finally enough. The truth was finally enough. And standing there, looking into each other's eyes, both hearts understood the same thing. This wasn't the end of the story. This was the beginning of the chapter both of you had been waiting for. A chapter built on honesty. A chapter built on courage. A chapter built on truth. A chapter built on love that survived everything life placed in its path. And as they stood before you, one final thought echoed inside their heart. A thought they knew was true. A thought they would never doubt again. No matter how far I traveled, no matter how long it took, my heart always knew where it wanted to return. And this time, they weren't going anywhere. My child, as those words hung in the air, I found my way back. Neither of you moved. Neither of you rushed. Because some moments are too sacred to hurry. Some moments deserve to be felt completely. And this was one of them. For years, both of you imagined what this reunion might look like. But reality was different. Better. Because reality carried something your imagination never could. Truth. The truth of everything. Survived. The truth that the connection survived. The truth that the feelings survived. The truth that despite all the distance, neither heart ever completely forgot. My child, they looked into your eyes. And for the first time in years, there was nowhere else they wanted to be. No place they would rather stand. No future they would rather pursue. Because the searching was over. The running was over. The hiding was over. The waiting was over. And now, only honesty remained. A tear rolled down their face. Then another. Then another. Not tears of pain. Tears of relief. The kind of relief that comes when a burden carried for years finally falls away. The kind of relief that comes when the truth is finally spoken. The kind of relief that comes when a lost person finally finds home. My child, they took a deep breath, trying to steady their emotions, trying to find words. Any words. Because there was still so much they wanted to say. So much they needed you to know. Then softly, almost as a whisper, they spoke again. I thought about you every day. The confession came naturally, without hesitation, without fear, without hiding. Not always in the same way. Not always with the same intensity. But there was never a year. Never a month. Never a season. When you disappeared from my heart, the tears in their eyes became impossible to hide. Because this was not rehearsed. This was not planned. This was not prepared. This was real, raw, honest, and finally free. My child, the wind moved gently around both of you. The world continued turning. People continued walking. Life continued happening. Yet somehow, it felt like the universe had become quiet. As if this moment existed outside of time. Outside of schedules. Outside of years. Outside of everything. Because two hearts were finally standing face to face. No walls. No masks. No fear. Just truth. Then they smiled. A beautiful smile. The smile of someone who finally understands what truly matters. And they said something they wished they had said years ago. Something simple. Something powerful. Something completely honest. Thank you. You looked surprised. Thank you. They nodded. Immediately. Yes. Another tear. Thank you for caring. Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for the memories. Thank you for the patience. Thank you for the love. Their voice broke. And thank you for leaving a light on in your heart long enough for me to find my way back. My child, at that moment, neither of you felt the weight of the lost years anymore. Because the future had become more important than the past. The possibilities had become more important than the regrets. The truth had become more important than the mistakes. And standing there, both of you realized something extraordinary. The story was never about finding perfection. It was about finding courage. The courage to tell the truth. The courage to return. The courage to forgive. The courage to believe again. The courage to love again. And now, that courage was standing between you. Alive. Real. Unstoppable. As the sun slowly began to set, painting the sky with gold and orange light, they reached for your hand. Not with fear. Not with uncertainty. But with peace. And for the first time in a very long time, the future didn't feel scary. It felt beautiful. Because whatever happened next, you would face it honestly. You would face it together. And my child, that was the beginning of everything. My child, as your hands finally met, a feeling neither of you expected washed over both hearts. Peace. Not excitement. Not nervousness. Not uncertainty. Peace. The kind of peace that arrives when something long delayed finally happens. The kind of peace that arrives when the heart stops fighting what it already knows. The kind of peace that arrives when two people stop running from the truth. My child, for a long moment neither of you spoke. Words seemed unnecessary, because some emotions are too deep for language. Some moments communicate more through silence than conversation ever could. And this was one of those moments. Then they smiled. A smile brighter than any smile you remembered. Not because life had become perfect, because they were finally present. Fully present. No longer trapped in the past. No longer terrified of the future. Simply present. Standing beside the person they never stopped thinking about. Standing beside the person who changed their life. Standing beside you. My child. The evening continued. The sky darkened. Stars slowly appeared overhead. And neither of you seemed eager to leave. Years had been spent apart. Neither heart wanted to waste another minute. So you walked. No destination. No plan. Just walking together. Talking. Laughing. Sharing stories. Creating new memories. Because the future was no longer something distant. The future had already begun. Then suddenly, the conversation became quiet again. They looked ahead, lost in thought, as if gathering courage for one final truth. One final confession. One final piece of their heart. You noticed immediately, because by now, you understood them. What is it? You asked softly. They smiled. A nervous smile. The first nervous smile all evening. Then they stopped walking, turned toward you, and whispered, "There was one thing I never told you." Your heart immediately raced, because after everything that had already been revealed, you couldn't imagine what remained unsaid. My child. They took a deep breath, then another, and finally spoke. The day I left. Their voice trembled. I thought I was losing you. A tear appeared, but what I didn't realize, another tear, was that I was actually losing myself. The words hit with incredible force, because suddenly everything made sense. The fear, the confusion, the running, the silence, the mistakes. It was never really about you. It was about a person who didn't yet know who they were. A person still learning, still growing, still struggling. And now, years later, that person finally understood. My child. They stepped closer, their eyes filled with emotion. And for the first time all night, their voice completely broke. Do you know what I learned? You remained silent, listening, feeling every word. I learned that success means nothing if nobody meaningful is there to share it. I learned that achievement means nothing without connection. I learned that running away never solves anything. Another tear rolled down their face. And then came the truth that had been waiting years to be spoken. The deepest truth. The most important truth. The truth hidden beneath every other confession. Every other regret. Every other memory. Every other lesson. They looked directly into your eyes. And whispered, I never stopped loving you. The world seemed to stop. The stars above. The wind around you. The sounds in the distance. Everything faded. Because only those words remained. I never stopped loving you. Not through the years. Not through the silence. Not through the distance. Not through the mistakes. Not through the fear. Not through any of it. The love survived. Quietly. Patiently. Faithfully. Waiting for the day truth would finally be stronger than fear. And now, that day had arrived. My child, for the first time in years, there were no more secrets. No more walls. No more hidden feelings. Only truth. And standing beneath the stars, with tears in both eyes, with years of lessons behind you, and an unwritten future ahead of you, both hearts finally understood something beautiful. Sometimes love does not return because it was lost. Sometimes love returns because the people involved finally became ready to receive it. And tonight, both of you were finally ready. My child, after those words were spoken, I never stopped loving you. Silence followed. Not because there was nothing to say, because the moment was too important to interrupt. Some truths carry so much weight that they change the atmosphere around them. And this truth was one of them. For years, those words lived only inside their heart. Hidden, protected, unspoken. Now they were finally free. And once truth becomes free, everything changes. My child, they looked at you, waiting, not expecting, not demanding, simply waiting. Because love cannot force. Love cannot pressure. Love cannot control. Love can only offer honesty. And that was exactly what they were doing. Offering honesty. Offering truth. Offering their heart exactly as it was. No masks. No games. No pretending. Just reality. For the first time. Completely. Then something beautiful happened. You smiled. Not because the years suddenly disappeared. Not because every wound instantly healed. Because the truth felt peaceful. Because honesty always feels lighter than confusion. Because clarity always feels better than uncertainty. My child. The stars continued shining overhead. The night air remained calm. And suddenly neither of you felt rushed. Because there was no longer anything to chase. Nothing to prove. Nothing to force. The truth had already arrived. Everything else could happen naturally. Then they laughed softly. A laugh filled with relief. A laugh that seemed to release years of tension. Years of worry. Years of questions. Years of wondering. And they shook their head. You know something funny? You smiled. What? Another laugh escaped them. I spent years imagining this moment. You listened. Curious. Interested. Because after everything, you wanted to know. They looked up at the stars. Then back at you. And every version I imagined was wrong. You laughed. Wrong. They nodded. Immediately. Every single one. I imagined dramatic speeches. I imagined perfect words. I imagined impossible conversations. Another smile. But this. They looked around. The peaceful night. The quiet street. The simple moment. This is better. Because reality rarely resembles fantasy. But sometimes, reality becomes more beautiful than fantasy. Because reality is real. My child. Hours passed without either of you noticing. Conversation flowed effortlessly. Stories became laughter. Laughter became memories. Memories became hope. And hope became the foundation of something new. Something neither of you could have created years ago. Because years ago, fear was stronger than wisdom. Years ago, insecurity was stronger than trust. Years ago, running felt easier than staying. Now everything was different. Now both hearts understood the value of honesty, the value of communication, the value of presence, the value of choosing someone every day. And those lessons changed everything. Then suddenly, they became quiet, not emotional, not nervous, thoughtful, deeply thoughtful, as if they were seeing the future for the first time. Then they whispered, I think this is what people mean when they talk about second chances. You looked at them, and they smiled. Not a smile filled with excitement. A smile filled with gratitude. Because second chances are not guaranteed. They are gifts. Rare gifts. Precious gifts. Life-changing gifts. And both of you knew it. My child. The night eventually reached its end. But neither of you felt sadness. Because unlike every goodbye before, this goodbye felt different. This goodbye carried certainty. Not uncertainty. Because now both hearts knew where they stood. Now both hearts knew the truth. Now both hearts knew that fear no longer controlled the story. As you stood together one final time before leaving, they looked into your eyes and softly said, this time, a small smile appeared. I'm staying. No dramatic promise. No grand declaration. Just 5 simple words. But those 5 words carried more meaning than any speech ever could. Because this time, they meant them. And deep inside, both of you knew it. For the first time in years. The future no longer looked like a question mark. It looked like a path neither of you would walk alone. And my child, that was the true beginning of the love story that was always meant to happen. The story built not on perfect people, but on transformed hearts. The story built not on fantasy, but on truth. The story built not on fear, but on love, my child. The days that followed felt different. Not because life suddenly became perfect, not because challenges disappeared, but because for the first time, both of you were facing life together instead of apart. And that changed everything. The morning messages became normal. The phone calls became normal. The laughter became normal. The presence became normal. Something that once felt impossible was quietly becoming part of everyday life. My child, one morning they woke up and realized something. An entire day had passed without regret. An entire day had passed without replaying old mistakes. An entire day had passed without wondering what could have been, because now they were living in what could be. And that realization filled their heart with gratitude. For years they were haunted by the past. Now they were inspired by the future. That was the difference. That was the miracle. Not the reunion. Not the confession. The shift from regret to hope. My child, one evening, as the two of you sat together watching the sunset, they became unusually quiet. You noticed immediately. Because by now you understood their silences. The thoughtful ones. The emotional ones. The meaningful ones. This was one of those silences. After several minutes, they finally spoke. You know what scares me? You looked at them. What? They smiled softly. Not a fearful smile. A vulnerable smile. Losing this. The honesty touched your heart. Because it was real. Not dramatic. Not exaggerated. Real. For years they thought strength meant pretending not to care. Now they understood that real strength is caring deeply and being brave enough to admit it. My child. They looked at the horizon. The golden sunlight reflecting in their eyes. And they continued. I used to think love was about finding the right person. A pause. Then a small smile. Now I think love is about becoming the right person. The words settled between you. Beautifully. Because both of you had changed. Both of you had grown. Both of you had become stronger. Not despite the pain. Partly because of it. The lessons mattered. The growth mattered. The healing mattered. And now those lessons were creating something stronger than either of you imagined. My child. As darkness slowly replaced daylight, they reached into their pocket, pulled out something small, something folded, something carefully protected. You immediately smiled. Another letter? They laughed. Not this time. Slowly they unfolded it. It wasn't a letter. It was a list. A handwritten list. Old. Worn. Clearly carried for a long time. What is it, you asked? Their eyes became emotional. And then they answered. The reasons I wanted to find you again. Your heart stopped. Because this wasn't written yesterday. This wasn't created for the moment. This was something carried through years. Something personal. Something real. My child. They began reading. Reason number 1. Their voice trembled. You always saw the best in me. A pause. Even when I couldn't see it myself. Another pause. Reason number 2. You made me feel understood. A tear appeared. Not judged. Not evaluated. Understood. They continued. Reason after reason. Memory after memory. Truth after truth. Each one revealing how deeply your presence impacted their life. Each one revealing how much they valued you. Each one revealing that your influence never truly disappeared. And by the time they reached the final reason, both of you had tears in your eyes. They looked down at the paper, then slowly looked back at you, and read the final line. The final reason. The most important reason. The reason written at the very bottom. I came back because no matter where life took me. Their voice broke completely. My heart never stopped feeling like it belonged with you. My child. The sunset disappeared. The stars appeared. And in that moment, neither of you needed anything else. No perfect words. No perfect future. No perfect answers. Because sometimes love is simply two hearts finally telling the truth. And tonight, the truth was finally complete. My child. For a long time, both of you thought this story was about finding each other again. But as the days passed, a deeper truth began to emerge. This story was never just about reunion. It was about transformation. Because if life had brought you together years earlier, neither of you would have been ready. The lessons had not been learned. The wounds had not been healed. The fears had not been faced. The growth had not happened. My child. One quiet evening, as rain softly tapped against the windows, the two of you sat together in comfortable silence. No need to impress. No need to perform. No need to pretend. Just peace. The kind of peace that only exists when two people finally feel safe with each other. Then suddenly they smiled. A thoughtful smile. And asked a question. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I never came back? The question hung in the air. For a moment neither of you answered. Because the truth was complicated. Maybe life would have continued. Maybe new chapters would have been written. Maybe different paths would have unfolded. But one thing was certain. There would always have been a question. A question living quietly inside both hearts. A question asking, what if? My child. Few things are heavier than unanswered questions. Few things follow people longer than unfinished stories. And that's why this reunion mattered. Not because it erased the past. Because it brought clarity. Because it brought truth. Because it brought peace. Then they looked at you. Their eyes filled with gratitude. And softly said, you gave me something nobody else ever gave me. You smiled. What? A tear appeared. Another chance to be honest. My child. Those words came from the deepest place in their heart. Because they understood something now. Second chances are not guaranteed. Many people never receive them. Many people spend their lives wishing for opportunities they can never reclaim. Yet somehow, life had given them one, and they did not intend to waste it. The rain continued falling outside. The room remained warm, and the conversation became deeper, more meaningful, more honest. Then they admitted something they had never told anyone. something they carried in silence for years. There were nights when I talked to you. You looked surprised. What do you mean? They laughed softly, embarrassed, but honest. I mean literally. Another laugh. I would sit alone and imagine you were there. I would tell you about my day. I would tell you about my struggles. I would tell you about things I accomplished. Their voice softened, and then I'd imagine what you would say back. My child. The confession was heartbreaking, not because it was sad, because it revealed how much space you occupied inside their heart. Even during separation, even during silence, even during years apart, you remained. The connection remained. The memories remained. Then they whispered. And the strange thing is, a smile appeared. You were usually right. Both of you laughed. The kind of laugh that comes from comfort. The kind of laugh that comes from understanding. The kind of laugh that comes from finally being home. My child. As the evening grew later, they reached for your hand, held it gently, and looked into your eyes. Not with fear, not with uncertainty, not with regret, with certainty. The kind of certainty that only arrives after years of searching, years of learning, years of growth. And then they spoke words that would stay with you forever. I don't know what the future looks like. A pause. I don't know what challenges we'll face. Another pause. I don't know what tomorrow brings. Then they smiled. But I know one thing. Their eyes never left yours. I want to face it with you. My child. In that moment, no grand promise was needed. No dramatic declaration was necessary. Because those words contained everything. Partnership, commitment, presence, love, truth. And for the first time in many years, both hearts felt completely at peace. Because the journey that began with separation had finally arrived at understanding. And the future that once seemed impossible was now standing directly in front of you, waiting to be written. Together, my child, as the weeks turned into months, and the months continued passing peacefully, something beautiful happened. The relationship stopped feeling like a second chance and started feeling like a new beginning. Because second chances focus on the past, new beginnings focus on the future. And both of you were finally looking forward instead of backward. My child, one morning, long before the sun rose, they woke up unexpectedly. The room was quiet. The world was still sleeping. Everything was peaceful. Yet their heart felt full, overwhelmingly full. Not with fear, not with regret, not with uncertainty, with gratitude, deep gratitude. Because for years they had imagined happiness as a destination, a place they would eventually reach, a future achievement, a future accomplishment, a future success. But now they understood something. Happiness wasn't waiting somewhere ahead. It was already here, in simple moments, in ordinary conversations, in shared laughter, in quiet evenings, in your presence. My child, that realization changed everything. Because they stopped chasing a perfect future and started appreciating the beautiful present. The present they once thought they lost forever. The present they once believed was impossible. The present standing directly in front of them now. Then one day, something happened that neither of you expected. Nothing dramatic, nothing shocking, something simple, yet powerful. The two of you were looking through old photographs together. Memories from years ago, moments frozen in time. Pieces of a story neither of you fully understood back then. You laughed at old pictures, shared stories, remembered forgotten details. And then suddenly, they became quiet, very quiet, holding one photograph, staring at it. You noticed immediately. What is it? They smiled softly, a smile filled with emotion. Then they showed you the picture. It was an ordinary photograph. Nothing special, just two people smiling, just a simple moment. Yet their eyes filled with tears. Do you know what's funny? You shook your head. What? Their voice trembled. When this picture was taken, they paused. I thought the best days were ahead of me. A tear rolled down their cheek. And then I spent years believing the best days were behind me. Another pause, another breath, another truth. But now, they looked directly into your eyes. I think the best days are happening right now. My child, those words carried wisdom. The kind of wisdom only life can teach. The kind of wisdom pain creates. The kind of wisdom growth creates. Because happiness is rarely found in the past. And it is rarely found in fantasy. It is found in the present moment. And finally, they understood that. The years of searching were over. The years of wondering were over. The years of asking what if were over. Now there was only one question. What beautiful things could be built from here? And for the first time, that question felt exciting, not frightening, because now both hearts trusted each other. Now both hearts communicated. Now both hearts understood the value of honesty. My child, as the evening arrived, the sky filled with stars. The same stars that once watched over lonely nights. The same stars that once witnessed unanswered prayers. The same stars that once watched two hearts separated by distance. And now, those same stars watched a different story. A story of healing. A story of growth. A story of courage. A story of love. They looked up at the night sky, then looked at you, and smiled. The peaceful smile of someone who finally found what they were searching for. Then they whispered softly, "You know something?" "What?" They squeezed your hand gently. "I spent years trying to find my future." A small laugh escaped them, and all along, their eyes glistened. My future was waiting for me to become brave enough to walk toward it. My child, the journey was never really about finding each other. The journey was about becoming the people capable of appreciating each other. And now, at last, the journey had brought both hearts home. Not to a place, not to a memory, not to a dream, to each other. And for the first time in a very long time, everything felt exactly where it was meant to be. My child, as time continued moving forward, something happened that neither of you noticed at first. The relationship stopped feeling like a miracle and started feeling like home. Not because the magic disappeared, because the connection became natural, real, steady, comfortable. The kind of love that doesn't need constant proof because its presence is proof enough. My child, one evening, long after the sun had disappeared, the two of you sat together watching the city lights in the distance. The world seemed quiet, peaceful, almost as if life itself had slowed down for a moment. Then they suddenly asked something unexpected. "Can I tell you the biggest truth I've ever learned?" You smiled. Of course. They looked down for a moment, thinking carefully, then slowly raised their eyes and whispered, "The person I was searching for was never really you." You looked surprised. Before you could respond, they continued, a small smile appeared. "I was searching for the version of myself capable of loving you correctly." My child, the words landed softly, but their meaning was powerful. Because years ago they loved through fear. Years ago they loved through insecurity. Years ago they loved through confusion. Now they loved through understanding, through honesty, through courage, through growth. And that changed everything. The wind moved gently around both of you. The night remained calm. And for a long time neither of you spoke. Because some truths deserve silence. Some truths deserve reflection. Some truths deserve space. Then they laughed softly. A peaceful laugh. The kind that comes from finally understanding your own journey. "You know something else?" You smiled. "What?" Their eyes filled with warmth. "For years I thought losing you was the end of my story." A pause. Then another. "But now I realize." Their voice softened. "It was actually the beginning of my transformation." My child, that was the truth. The pain taught lessons. The separation created growth. The loneliness created wisdom. The regret created courage. Every difficult chapter prepared both hearts for this one. And now, neither of you wished to erase the lessons. Because the lessons created the people sitting here today. Stronger, wiser, kinder, more honest, more grateful, more capable of real love. My child, the stars above seemed brighter than usual. The night felt gentler than usual. And suddenly they reached into their pocket one final time. Not a letter, not a photograph, not a list, just a small folded piece of paper. They handed it to you. You unfolded it carefully, and written in simple handwriting were only a few words. "If I ever find my way back, remind me never to run again." You looked up, tears filling your eyes, and they smiled. Because that note had been written years ago, during a lonely night, during a painful season, during a time when they didn't know if they would ever see you again. Yet somehow, life brought them here. Life gave them the opportunity they thought was gone forever. And now, the promise written on that paper no longer felt like hope. It felt like reality. My child, as the night grew later, both of you sat quietly together. No dramatic speeches, no grand declarations, no perfect ending, just peace. The kind of peace that comes when the heart finally stops searching. The kind of peace that comes when two people stop running from what is true. The kind of peace that comes when love no longer needs to fight to be heard. And deep inside, both of you understood something beautiful. The story was never about finding a soulmate. The story was about becoming the person capable of recognizing one when they finally returned. And now, the searching was over. The waiting was over. The fear was over. Only love remained. Only truth remained. Only the future remained. And for the first time in many years, both hearts were ready to walk into that future together. My child, as the years continued unfolding, the relationship grew stronger. Not because there were never disagreements. Not because life became perfect, but because both of you learned something most people never learn. Love is not sustained by feelings alone. Love is sustained by choices. Daily choices. Small choices. Ordinary choices. The choice to communicate. The choice to listen. The choice to stay. The choice to understand. The choice to fight for each other instead of against each other. My child, one rainy afternoon, while sitting together and watching the storm outside, they suddenly smiled. Not because anything special happened, because they realized something. For years they chased extraordinary moments, grand achievements, huge milestones, life-changing events. Yet now, the moments they treasured most were simple. Sharing coffee together, talking late into the night, laughing at things nobody else would understand, sitting quietly without needing words. The ordinary had become extraordinary, and that realization filled their heart with gratitude. Then they turned toward you, a thoughtful expression in their eyes, and softly asked, "Do you know what my biggest fear used to be?" You shook your head. "What?" They laughed quietly. "That I would never find the right person." A pause, then another smile. "And do you know what my biggest fear is now?" You waited, curious, interested, because their answer clearly mattered. They reached for your hand, holding it gently, then whispered, "That I might forget how lucky I am." My child, those words carried wisdom, because gratitude protects what pride destroys. Gratitude protects what carelessness destroys. Gratitude reminds us that blessings should never be taken for granted. And neither of you wanted to take this blessing for granted. Not after everything. Not after the lessons. Not after the years. Not after the journey. My child, the evening slowly turned into night. The rain continued falling softly. The room felt warm, safe, peaceful, and suddenly they became emotional again. Not sad emotional, grateful emotional. The kind of emotion that appears when someone looks at their life and realizes how much has changed. They looked into your eyes and said something they had never said before. "If I could go back." A pause. "If I could speak to the version of myself who walked away." Another pause. "I wouldn't tell them how much pain they were about to experience." You listened carefully, because every word mattered. "I wouldn't tell them how many mistakes they would make. I wouldn't tell them how many nights they would spend regretting their choices." Then a tear appeared, and they smiled. Instead, they whispered, "I would tell them this." Their voice softened. "One day you're going to understand what truly matters. One day you're going to stop running. One day you're going to become brave enough. One day you're going to find your way back. And when that day comes," their eyes glistened. "Don't waste another second." My child, the room became silent. Not empty silence. Beautiful silence. The kind of silence that appears when truth fills every corner. The kind of silence that feels complete. And as both of you sat together, watching the rain, listening to the quiet, feeling the peace, one final realization settled into both hearts. The greatest gift was never the reunion. The greatest gift was who you became because of the journey. The patience, the wisdom, the courage, the understanding, the gratitude, the love. Everything the journey taught. Everything the journey created. Everything the journey transformed. And now, standing at the beginning of a future neither of you could have imagined years ago, both hearts understood something beautiful. You were never meant to carry fear forever. You were never meant to carry regret forever. You were never meant to carry loneliness forever. Those chapters taught their lessons. And now, a new chapter had begun. A chapter built on trust. A chapter built on honesty. A chapter built on faith. A chapter built on love that finally found the courage to stay. And my child, as the night quietly wrapped around the world, both hearts smiled, because for the first time, there was nowhere else they wanted to be. Together, exactly where they were meant to be. My child, as the years passed, the story continued, not as a fairy tale, not as a perfect romance, but as something far more valuable. A real love, a love tested by time, a love strengthened by truth, a love protected by choice. And every single day, both of you chose each other again. My child, one evening, many years after that first reunion, the two of you were sitting together on a quiet porch. The sun was setting. The sky glowed with shades of gold and crimson. The same kind of sunset that once watched over lonely nights. The same kind of sunset that once witnessed prayers whispered through tears. Yet everything felt different now. Because you were no longer praying for a miracle. You were living inside one. Not a dramatic miracle. A simple one. The miracle of presence. The miracle of peace. The miracle of having someone who stayed. My child. They looked at you for a long moment. The way people look at something they never want to lose. Then they smiled. A smile filled with years of gratitude. Years of memories. Years of shared experiences. And they quietly said, "You know what amazes me?" You smiled. "What?" They laughed softly. "The fact that I almost missed this." The words carried weight. Because both of you knew exactly what they meant. The life. The memories. The laughter. The late-night conversations. The quiet mornings. The shared dreams. The ordinary moments that became extraordinary because they were shared together. All of it. Almost lost. Almost abandoned. Almost left behind. Because of fear. My child. Fear had once convinced them to run. Now wisdom taught them to stay. Fear had once convinced them they were not enough. Now love taught them they never needed to be perfect. Fear had once made them hide. Now truth allowed them to be fully seen. And that transformation changed everything. Then they became quiet, looking toward the horizon, watching the final sunlight disappear. And after several moments, they whispered something they had never said before. "Thank you for waiting for the person I was becoming." The words immediately filled the air with emotion. Because they understood something now. Growth takes time. Healing takes time. Transformation takes time. And somehow, through all the twists and turns of life, the timing finally aligned. My child, as darkness slowly settled across the sky, the stars began appearing one by one. The same stars that watched over every chapter. The painful chapters, the lonely chapters, the uncertain chapters, and now, the beautiful chapters. The stars had witnessed everything. And if they could speak, they would tell a remarkable story. A story about two hearts. A story about mistakes. A story about growth. A story about courage. A story about love. A story about finding your way back. My child, life rarely follows the timeline people expect. Rarely. Sometimes the path is longer. Sometimes the lessons are harder. Sometimes the journey feels impossible. But what is meant to teach you will teach you. What is meant to transform you will transform you. And what is meant to remain will remain. Not because it was easy, because it was real. The evening grew darker. The stars grew brighter. And the world became quiet. Then they reached for your hand, just as they had done countless times before. A simple gesture, yet one that still carried meaning. One that still carried love. One that still carried promise. And softly, almost like a prayer, they spoke the words that would become the final truth of the story. If I had to live my life again, a small smile appeared. I would still choose every lesson. Another smile. I would still choose every challenge. Another. I would still choose every difficult chapter. Then their eyes met yours, filled with certainty, filled with peace, filled with love, because they already knew the ending. And finally they whispered, "Because every road eventually led me back to you." My child, the journey was complete. The searching was over. The fear was gone. The truth had won. The love had stayed. And beneath a sky full of stars, two hearts sat together, grateful for every lesson, grateful for every chapter, grateful for every moment. Because the greatest love stories are not the ones without storms. They are the ones that survive them. And this story had survived them all. If this message touched your heart, take a moment and write, "I release fear, I embrace love, and I trust God's perfect timing." Red heart, folded hands, and remember, what is meant for you will never pass you by. What God has written for your life cannot be erased by delays, mistakes, distance, or fear. Every lesson had a purpose. Every tear had a purpose. Every closed door had a purpose. Every waiting season had a purpose. Because God was preparing both hearts for the moment they would finally be ready. Trust the journey. Trust the process. Trust God's timing. And never forget, the right love doesn't arrive when you're desperate for it. It arrives when God knows both hearts are ready for it. Red heart, type Amen if you believe God is working behind the scenes in your life right now.